Jung identified 7 psychological environments that undermine 90% of people's mental resilience. These aren't physical locations, but mental traps we step into daily without noticing. Many spend years inside these spaces, feeling exhausted, anxious, or directionless, blaming themselves without understanding why. Jung, however, recognized the truth. Certain environments can literally rewire the brain to work against its owner. In 1961, Jung worked with a patient who appeared completely normal on the surface, but was slowly unraveling mentally. Jung traced the issue back to 7 distinct psychological spaces the man entered every day. Once Jung guided him to identify and escape these mental traps, the transformation was remarkable. Today, I'll show you which mental environments are quietly damaging your mind, how to detect when you're caught inside them, and the escape strategies Jung developed to protect your sanity. What Jung uncovered about these harmful spaces will permanently change the way you view your relationships, surroundings, and decisions. The first and most dangerous space Jung identified is the echo chamber. This is where every voice you hear reflects your own thoughts, beliefs, and biases back at you until they feel like unquestionable truth. Jung's patients spent hours in social clubs and political groups where everyone shared the same views, fears about societal changes, and resentment towards certain communities. He believed he was staying informed, but Jung saw that he was being psychologically poisoned. Here's what happens to your brain inside an echo chamber. Your neural pathways actually weaken over time. Research by Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA shows that when the mind is never challenged, critical thinking skills deteriorate like unused muscles. Jung described this as collective possession. When group opinions replace independent thought, individuals stop questioning because asking questions feels like disloyalty. Their worldview becomes rigid, fragile, and fearful of alternative perspectives. There are clear warning signs that you may be trapped in an echo chamber. You can predict exactly how those around you will respond to any subject. At different viewpoints feel threatening instead of intellectually engaging. You no longer consider the possibility that your core beliefs might be wrong. Conversations tend to reinforce rather than test your assumptions. Jung observed that people in echo chambers don't simply stop developing, they begin to decline. Their thinking narrows, grows more fearful, and becomes increasingly dependent on the group for a sense of security. But this is only the first way such environments harm you. Echo chambers make the mind weaker, leaving you more vulnerable to another harmful space, the comparison arena, where self-worth is measured against others' success and social status. Jung's patient, already fragile from group-driven thinking, became consumed with comparing himself to those in his social circle. Every success of others felt like his own failure. Each accomplishment seemed diminished because someone else had achieved more. Dr. Rachel Callagher's research at the University of the West of England confirms what Jung observed. Ongoing comparison physically reduces the size of the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain tied to self-worth and decision-making. Here lies the psychological trap. Comparison does not drive real improvement. Instead, it conditions the mind to see inadequacy everywhere. Jung referred to this as the inflation-deflation cycle. You either feel above others or beneath them, rarely just content being yourself. A patient once told Jung, "I got promoted at work, yet all I could think about was how my college friend became a CEO faster. My own achievement felt meaningless because it wasn't a relative victory." Here are some warning signs you're stuck in the trap of comparison. Other people's accomplishments make you feel like a failure. You reach your goals but remain unsatisfied because someone else did it better. You shape your life to appear successful rather than to feel authentic. Your happiness depends on staying ahead of others. Jung saw this mindset as especially harmful because it distances you from your values and genuine desires. You stop pursuing joy and instead chase recognition, but there's an even deeper issue to consider. Before moving forward, it's important to understand the science behind why these environments are so destructive. Modern neuroscience supports Jung's insights into environmental psychology. Research by Dr. Daniel Siegel shows that toxic mental environments trigger ongoing cortisol release, which physically shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain linked to memory and emotional balance. Yet Jung recognized something science later confirmed. These environments don't just harm you temporarily, they reprogram your baseline mental state. Spending too much time in toxic spaces trains the brain to recreate those same harmful patterns, even when you're alone. Jung's patient developed what neuroscientists now call learned helplessness. His brain had been conditioned to expect failure, criticism, and inadequacy. Even in safe surroundings, he struggled to feel calm because his neural pathways had been reshaped by psychological stress. This is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. These environments condition your unconscious mind to work against you." What makes it more troubling is that most people don't realize it's happening. The damage builds slowly, subtly, and often without conscious awareness. The third harmful environment Jung identified is the performance theater. Here, authenticity is suppressed, and recognition comes only when you play the right role. One of Jung's patients worked in a corporate setting where showing vulnerability meant professional ruin. He forced himself to laugh at unfunny jokes, agree with opinions he disagreed with, and conceal any part of his identity that didn't align with company culture. Jung referred to this as persona identification, when the mask you wear eventually becomes the only identity you recognize. The patient admitted, "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been performing for so long that my real self feels like a stranger." This environment is psychologically destructive because it teaches you to abandon yourself step by step. Each compromise may seem small, but together they build into complete self-betrayal. Dr. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion reveals that people stuck in performance theaters often develop harsh inner critics. They internalize the judgment of these environments and carry it everywhere they go. Some warning signs include feeling drained rather than energized after social interactions, agreeing with ideas you don't truly support, avoiding opinions that could be unpopular, feeling like you're wearing a mask you can't remove, believing your real thoughts and emotions are unsafe or inappropriate. The patient described it well. "I became so skilled at being what others wanted that I forgot what I wanted. And when I tried to remember, nothing was there." Jung realized that these spaces don't just hide your true self, they gradually erase it. Layer by layer, compromise by compromise, until only a hollow performance remains. And because performance theaters train you to conceal your authentic self, they often trap you in the fourth harmful environment, what Jung called the silent suffering space. This is where emotional needs are buried beneath the illusion of stability. Jung frequently saw this pattern in patients from families that looked perfect on the outside. Love was assumed but rarely expressed. Problems were ignored rather than confronted. Maintaining appearances mattered more than building genuine connection. One patient grew up in exactly this type of family. "We never fought," he told Jung, "but we never really talked either. I was taught that having needs was selfish and showing pain was weakness." This condition creates what Jung described as emotional starvation. Ignoring emotional needs doesn't make them vanish. They sink into the unconscious, giving rise to anxiety, depression, and a persistent sense of emptiness. Dr. Sue Johnson's work on attachment reveals that suppressing emotions in relationships actively disrupts the nervous system. The body remains in chronic stress because these needs are repeatedly unmet. The greatest danger of this state is how normal it can seem. One of Jung's patients reflected, "I believed we were a close family because we never argued. I didn't realize that avoiding conflict also meant avoiding closeness." Warning signs: living in silent suffering, feeling lonely even among others, adapting to pain instead of healing from it, viewing emotional support as selfish or weak, carrying strong feelings without a safe place to share them, a fragile sense of peace in relationships, which feels like it might collapse under honesty. Jung observed that people in this condition often lose touch with their emotional reality. They sense something is wrong but cannot name it, because acknowledging it would violate the unspoken rules of the family or group. The fifth danger zone is the opposite of silence, a storm of chaos where endless mental stimulation buries the inner voice, making self-reflection nearly impossible. Jung's patient lived here constantly. Newspapers demanded attention, radio broadcasts stirred anxiety, social gatherings drained him, and work followed him home. Every quiet moment was filled with reading, conversation, or activity because stillness felt intolerable. But Jung recognized this wasn't about preference, it was avoidance. The patient feared what silence might reveal, unresolved wounds, difficult choices, or hidden aspects of himself he did not want to confront. Supporting this, Dr. Adam Ghazali's research at UCSF shows that ongoing overstimulation impairs the ability to think clearly and make sound decisions. Your prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded and begins making impulsive decisions. Simply to ease mental strain, Jung referred to this as psychic fragmentation. When your focus is scattered, you lose the ability to turn experiences into insight. The patient absorbed vast amounts of information, but couldn't find meaning in it. Here's the danger. Chaos becomes addictive. The brain adjusts to constant stimulation and begins craving stronger input just to feel balanced. Moments of quiet bring anxiety because the nervous system no longer knows how to regulate itself. Warning signs that you're stuck in the chaos cycle. Silence instantly makes you reach for a book, newspaper, or background noise. You form strong opinions on many topics, but lack deep understanding of any. You stay busy, yet struggle to recall what you've achieved. Slowing down produces unease rather than calm. You consume endless information, but still feel hollow inside. Jung's patient admitted, "I keep myself occupied because stopping forces me to face what I've been avoiding. But I'm exhausted from running." The chaos cycle pushes you away from your inner voice, leaving you vulnerable to the sixth danger zone, the self-abandonment chamber. This is where you consistently ignore your needs, instincts, and truth. It's the most subtle trap because it develops gradually. You say yes when everything inside says no. You remain in draining relationships because leaving feels harder than staying. You choose comfort instead of honesty, and safety instead of growth. Jung's patient explained it clearly. "I became so skilled at dismissing my instincts that they disappeared. Every decision was based on others' expectations, what seemed reasonable, or what would prevent conflict." Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's trauma research confirms this. Chronic self-abandonment physically severs your connection to the body's natural wisdom. You gradually lose touch with recognizing what you truly need, want or feel because those signals have been repeatedly ignored. Jung described this as soul loss, not in a mystical sense, but as a psychological condition where you become disconnected from your core self. One patient explained, "It felt like I was living someone else's life. I couldn't remember the last time I made a choice based on what I genuinely wanted." This state is especially dangerous because it often disguises itself as maturity, responsibility, or even selflessness. Society tends to reward this kind of self-abandonment, which makes it harder to see it as harmful. Warning signs. You may be in this stage of self-abandonment include, you can't recall the last time you checked in with your feelings. Most decisions are made based on expectations rather than what feels right. You've stopped having preferences about things that once mattered. Life feels like it's running on autopilot. When asked what you want, you honestly don't know. Jung observed that this state creates a deep sense of emptiness. A patient once told him, "I achieved everything I was told I should want, yet I felt completely hollow. I didn't know who I was beneath all the obligations and expectations." The seventh and most dangerous state, Jung identified exists entirely within the mind. The shadow basement, the inner place where parts of yourself too painful or shameful to face are locked away. Jung's patient had spent years avoiding this inner world. Whenever distressing memories, uncomfortable thoughts, or difficult emotions emerged, he suppressed them into what Jung termed the personal unconscious. Jung uncovered something deeply unsettling. What you suppress never truly disappears. Instead, it strengthens in the dark, shaping your behavior in ways you fail to recognize. The patient noticed himself destroying relationships, reacting excessively to small issues, and falling back into patterns he promised to avoid. According to Dr. Peter Levine's research on trauma, unresolved emotional experiences remain stored in the nervous system, causing ongoing dysregulation until they are consciously processed. Jung described this as shadow possession, when the hidden parts of yourself you've rejected begin directing your life from the unconscious. The patient admitted to Jung, "I became everything I disliked about my father, but I didn't realize it until the harm was already done." The shadow basement is dangerous because avoidance only strengthens these rejected aspects. They emerge as projection, addiction, bursts of anger, or destructive self-sabotage. Yet Jung also discovered that the shadow holds immense strength and creativity. Once consciously acknowledged, the patient's anger transformed into passionate advocacy. His sorrow evolved into profound empathy. His shame turned into powerful compassion for those facing similar struggles. Warning: signs of avoiding the shadow basement include intense emotional reactions that catch you off guard, repeating relationship cycles despite awareness, harsh judgment of others for traits you secretly fear in yourself, persistent anxiety or depression without a clear source, feeling as though you're battling an unseen force. Within, Jung realized that healing requires entering this basement, not with criticism, but with curiosity and compassion. Now that you recognize these 7 harmful traps, the next step is to ask, how do you break free? Jung introduced the individuation process, a structured path towards psychological wholeness. Step 1. Conscious recognition. You cannot exit a place unless you recognize you are in it. Jung's patient first had to clearly identify which environments shaped his daily life. This step requires complete honesty, free from self-criticism. Step 2. Environmental audit. Evaluate every physical and digital space you regularly engage with. Jung emphasized that awareness turns hidden influences into deliberate choices. Ask yourself, does this space encourage my growth or does it restrict me? Step 3. Strategic withdrawal. You don't need to abandon your life entirely, but you must reduce exposure to harmful psychological environments. Jung's patient began with small adjustments, spending less time in draining social groups, setting limits with negative individuals, and carving out daily moments for solitude and reflection. Step 4. Conscious integration. This is where Jung's method becomes truly transformative. Avoiding negativity is not enough. You must intentionally build supportive environments. Surround yourself with people who challenge you respectfully, communities that nurture development, and spaces that value authenticity. Step 5. Shadow work. Jung believed that unless you confront what remains hidden in your shadow, you will unknowingly repeat destructive cycles. This involves therapy, journaling, or other practices that bring unconscious material into awareness. Step 6. Ongoing maintenance. Jung found that psychological freedom demands continuous attention. Toxic environments are tempting because they provide false security, easy acceptance, or familiar routines. Growth requires deliberately choosing progress over comfort and truth over convenience. After 6 months, the patient reflected, "I didn't realize how much energy I was losing in those harmful spaces. Now that I've stepped away, I finally feel like my mind belongs to me again." Jung recorded striking transformations when individuals managed to free themselves from these psychological traps. His patient's journey became a model for countless others pursuing mental freedom. Within just 3 months of leaving the echo chamber, his ability to think critically improved significantly. He began to challenge his assumptions, seek out broader perspectives, and make choices grounded in evidence rather than conformity. Once he stepped away from the comparison arena, he uncovered genuine interests and goals of his own. He no longer measured his value against others, but instead pursued work aligned with his principles instead of his image. Leaving the performance stage proved more difficult, as it meant disappointing those who favored his mask over his true self. Yet Jung reminded him that relationships built on false appearances cannot be considered authentic. Escaping the silent suffering space required learning entirely new ways of communication. He needed to practice stating his needs, setting boundaries, and asking for help, skills never demonstrated within his family. Breaking free from the chaos storm involved developing patience for stillness, boredom, and the initial unease of quiet moments. Jung emphasized that wisdom emerges only within reflective silence. The self-abandonment chamber demanded the boldest change, making choices based on his inner truth rather than external expectations. While this meant disappointing some people, it also marked the beginning of living with authenticity. Work in the shadow basement continued, but every integration made him more complete, more compassionate, and less inclined to project his struggles onto others. Jung observed that those who escape these traps don't just feel relief, they fundamentally change. Their relationships grow healthier, their decisions become clearer, and they develop what he described as psychological sovereignty. Jung's insights into his patient's progress highlight a profound truth about psychological environments. When you change how you relate to these spaces, the spaces themselves transform. Initially, his family resisted his boundaries and emotional openness, attempting to draw him back into silence because his growth disrupted their familiar dynamics. But Jung taught him to hold his ground with compassion rather than hostility. Gradually, his honesty encouraged others to open up. His sister began sharing feelings she had hidden for years. His father finally acknowledged the depression he had kept secret for decades. The family started to heal because one person chose not to continue the dysfunction. At work, he stopped focusing on performance and began contributing with sincerity. Some colleagues felt unsettled, but many were inspired. He realized that authentic leadership was far stronger than approval-seeking behavior. Jung described this as the ripple effect of individuation. When you refuse to engage in destructive patterns, you force those patterns to either change or fade away. The patient told Jung, "I thought changing myself would leave me isolated, but it actually drew people who valued genuine connection. I gave up many shallow relationships for a few meaningful ones, and it was the best choice I ever made." This became Jung's ultimate insight into these psychological traps. They exist because we collectively agree to live within them. But when enough people choose freedom, the whole environment begins to transform. Remember Jung's original discovery: 90% of mental strength is eroded by these 7 psychological environments. But now you know what most do not. You can choose differently. Jung's patient began as a man slowly breaking down in spaces that appeared normal, even comfortable. He ended as someone who reclaimed his inner freedom and helped others do the same. The 7 dangerous places Jung identified are not abstract. They are real environments we face daily. The echo chamber that confirms bias while weakening thought. The comparison arena that strips meaning from achievement. The performance stage that rewards the false and punishes the real, the silent suffering space that buries needs. Under false peace, the chaos storm that drowns your inner voice. The self-abandonment chamber where you gradually betray yourself, and the shadow basement where you hide away parts of your soul. But Jung also revealed the way forward, not by running or avoiding, but through awareness, deliberate choices, and the courage to grow beyond comfort. The patient Jung worked with in 1961 later became a therapist himself. guiding others to recognize and escape these traps. He understood that real mental strength is not about avoiding struggle, but choosing the kind that serves growth. Jung's final lesson: these places will always exist and they will always tempt. Echo chambers offer easy belonging. Comparison promises motivation. Performance gives approval. Silent suffering feels like calm. Chaos distracts from pain. Self-abandonment avoids conflict. Shadow basements conceal shame. But true strength comes from choosing growth over ease, authenticity over approval, and awareness over convenience. The question is not if you will encounter these places. You will. The real question is, will you recognize them? Will you have the courage to leave? And will you create environments where others can also be free? Jung believed the future of human consciousness depends on individuals who choose psychological freedom over unconscious conformity. That choice begins by recognizing where you are right now and deciding where you want to go. Your mind is not your enemy, but the environments you allow it to inhabit may be. Which of these 7 traps have you spent too much time in? Share your reflections in the comments. Naming where we've been is often the first step toward freedom. Subscribe for more insights that can help you transform your relationship with your own mind. And if you're ready to go deeper into Jung's work on psychological transformation, watch my video on Carl Jung's most dangerous psychological sign, Stay Alert, where I reveal how to recognize when someone is projecting their unconscious shadow and why stepping away may be your only protection. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.